welcome to Relish Books. Today I'm talking about Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. This is more of a novella than like a book, like a novel-length book. First Conrad piece of work that I've read, and something that I love about reading, and something that I love about reading classics. Sometimes classics and classic authors can get lumped together as having a certain style, and there's an element of truth in that, but sometimes when you read a ton of classics, you can kind of feel like you've experienced most of the styles that there are. And like even coming to an author for the first time that you know is celebrated, I think sometimes when you know them by reputation, you have an expectation for what their style is going to be like. And you expect their writing to be really good, but you don't expect to be surprised because you kind of think you've seen most styles at this point. And I love that while no, there's not technically anything new, there's always room to be surprised. There are always styles out there that you haven't experienced yet, no matter how much you've read. And I was very pleasantly surprised by Joseph Conrad. I loved his writing style instantly. It is so unique, so good. I think it's fascinating that English wasn't his first language. This isn't a translated work. He wrote it in English, but he didn't start really speaking English until he was a young adult. He was born in Poland, I believe, or a Polish community. So he grew up speaking Polish and French and then started writing in English later on. And I almost wonder if that's part of what gives his style its special quality. Sometimes when you come to study a language deeply, when it's not your first language, you can have a slightly different impression of it and a different usage of it, a different take on certain phrases and stuff that maybe someone who grew up speaking it doesn't have. So, I don't know. It's probably just his personal style, but I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, I loved his word choices, his phrase choices. I don't know if anybody's really made this comparison before. Maybe it's a weird comparison, but reading it, the thing that it reminded me the most of, certainly his style is unique, but the style that it reminded me the most of was actually H.P. Lovecraft because of the way that he used language to skirt around the issue that he's talking about. I think I've talked about this before when I talked about H.P. Lovecraft, but I think it's so interesting when an author has the command of language to where they're trying to create an impression, they're trying to create a feeling. In Heart of Darkness, a lot of the time I feel like the feeling that he's trying to give you is of insecurity, and there's a lot of like, you can't actually see what's going on. Sometimes literally, and sometimes I feel like they literally can't see what's going on. And then he gives you this feeling of not being able to tell what's going on through the writing, and I think it's brilliant. But instead of so if you have an object, instead of describing the object, these authors will describe, as it were, the shape of the air around the object, and sort of give you an impression of the object in that way. And these authors will do that about feelings, about emotions, about impressions, usually if they're trying to convey something scary or horrifying or something that they can't really convey, but they want to feel powerful and big somehow, if that makes sense. And I think it's really impressive how these authors are able to do that. I think lesser authors try, and if you don't have a huge command of language and of what you're really trying to do, if you're not a master at it, it fails miserably. But when it's well done, I think it's really amazing and really interesting. I thought the book was fascinating to read. I don't pretend to know everything that he's trying to say with it. I don't know if he knew himself everything he was trying to say with it. As readers, especially of classics, a lot of people, a lot of professors and critics like to look back and tell you everything that the author was trying to say. And a lot of the time, I think people put things in authors' mouths that they never intended, that they never would have said. So I don't know what all he's trying to tell, but I think mainly what he's trying to convey is really a set of impressions, a set of feelings, a sense of this, what it was like in this place, in this time. I've heard people say, I didn't come up with this, but I've heard people say that what he's trying to do with the story is kind of contrast civilization with uncivilized places and saying that both have a heart of darkness, or that the civilized man is just as dark and savage in his heart as these tribal communities. And I do think that there is some truth to that. I think that that is probably part of what he was trying to say. But I don't know. It's an interesting story. So many interesting and thought-provoking lines. Again, I don't know if he was trying to say something definite so much as he's trying to make people think and make people feel certain things. And I think he certainly succeeded in that. It was very thought-provoking, confusing in a really good way. But yeah, mostly my biggest impression was I love the writing. I marked a couple passages to share that I thought were really neat. They're not necessarily like at all the best written passages or what really gives you a taste of the book as a whole, but I thought that they were interesting. When I read these particular passages, there were a lot of passages that stood out to me, but these two that I'm going to read in particular, I was particularly struck by. This one because it's a great example of when that he can be clear, that he doesn't have to be vague, that he's using that vagueness for his story purposes, and his clarity and his kind of funny descriptions of people are really great. There's this description of a man who's briefly in the story. When near the buildings, I met a white man, in such an unexpected elegance of get-up that in the first moment I took him for a sort of vision. I saw a high starched collar, white cuffs, a light alpaca jacket, snowy trousers, a clear necktie, and varnished boots. No hat. Hair parted, brushed, oiled, under a green-lined parasol held in a big white hand. He was amazing and had a penholder behind his ear. I shook hands with this miracle, and I learned he was the company's chief accountant, and that all the bookkeeping was done at the station. That line of, I love that he doesn't overrun his sentences. He'll let them run long or he'll cut them short. He's just a master at what he's trying to do. But that line, he was amazing and had a penholder behind his ear. That's a perfect line. Amazing. And then this other one is a little more in the sense of the mystical, which is a lot of what the book is like. And I remembered I confounded the beat of the drum with the beating of my heart, and was pleased at its calm regularity. I kept to the track, though, then stopped to listen. The night was very clear, a dark blue space, sparkling with dew and starlight, in which black things stood very still. Yeah, just this very impressionistic and yet clear writing. I loved it. Definitely read it. Think about it. Kind of wrestle with everything that he's trying to say. I will say I think it's a pretty, not to be funny, a pretty dark story. There's not a lot of hope in it. You know, it's the story of this voyage of disillusionment, really, of horror, but there's not really a lot of, he's exploring kind of the depravity of humanity in some ways, that is found to an extent in all people, but there's not a lot of hope in it. And I'm not saying that that would necessarily fit into this story super well, but it is kind of a not just, a dark view of this very dark story, but I feel like he kind of takes just a dark view of humanity in general, which is always sad to see. So many of these great classic authors were very depressed, disturbed people, which is tragic and is something to keep in mind, I think, when you are admiring their work, because there's always a limit how much you should admire these authors, I think. So that's my last little thing. I loved it, but obviously it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect in the world of writing, but really, really amazing. So those are my thoughts on Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.